are Guy, Ivan, Wert, and Silviu. Our product managers here at UiPath, and they will show you, well, that's a surprise, but it's mostly about Autopilot, as the title suggests. So, Guy, please take it over.
Yeah, okay, cool. Hello, everyone. Let me share my PowerPoint here. I'll go full screen on this. Uh, Continue to share. Yeah, so let's start with the introduction of as much as we really want to address Autopilot and how helpful Autopilot is, and showing that across the platform and its capabilities. The first part of the talk track for today is about API workflows and API integrations, right? There is I'm hoping all of you seen the announcements that API workflows went GA. We've been in community for a while. We went GA at the end of November. And some of the reasons why we built this is from an audience like yourself, right? It's hard to do system to system integration, right? Cross APIs. We built an engine and a designer catered specifically to chain API calls together to make that very seamlessly from a dev point of view, and to drive in real use cases where real-time integrations are like super key, right? The fact that you have to very quickly respond to events happening in third-party systems, on queues, on anything that is really large at scale, right? And that drives that humans and for RPA, a lot of these challenges are the fact that you have to execute that at scale, right? Thousands and thousands a day and millions a month, etc. Right? So we built an engine that can solve a lot of that problem space where there is no UI as an example, but you have to integrate with their AP, with that vendor's APIs or with your local APIs, right? Um, and so that's the introduction of UiPath API workflows. Again, we released it end of November. We're very excited for you to like try this out. It's available in Studio. We'll go through it in a minute in a live demo, but you can in Studio Web, right? You can go in and say, in my solution, I want to add an API project to my solution. And the entire idea is that the full canvas is catered for you to deal with complexities that you might see today that when you're building an RPA and you want to do connector calls or HTTP calls, right? Where we serialize and deserialize everything for you, which as much as that is helpful, that can also very often be a pain and a burden. So when you jump into the API workflow canvas, you'll notice that we put a big effort into being fully transparent, even though, and I'm hoping many of you will raise your hand when I say it is built on top of the connector catalog that integration service has been offering, right? All the connections, the triggers, etc. All of that should sound familiar. We brought that in a new canvas that is now transparent with all these ideas and methods and endpoints that you can call. You'll see your requests, you'll see your headers, you'll see the headers coming back from the responses, and most specifically, you'll see the full content that comes back from the vendor or from our pre-curated activities. And you can browse through the JSON, right? You can see full arrays, it's easy to loop over arrays, etc. If you need to start paging, you can start doing these things. Most specifically, the end result when you package this up is built with API calls, right, that you can chain together and then execute and retransform that data set with JavaScript. So the scripting language in API workflows is JS. And that now allows for really fast execution, fast transformation, etc. If you then bring all of this together in the platform, you can build these API workflows to add them to your agents. They can live as a tool, and where that API workflow will have some logic, it will transform some of the complex data sets from the vendor out of it and just feed information into an agent that you want it to see, right? That will also limit some of the tokens that you're feeding into that agent, etc. You can call an API workflow as a run job from robots. Obviously, you can manually start it. You can start it from connector triggers today, and you can also bring it in from Maestro. This is not moving. There we go. And I wanted to focus on this screen, and you'll see more of that in the demo. there's a lot going on in the screen in this screenshot, right? But there on the left side, you'll see how transparent we want to be, right? You'll see all the JSON, you'll see how we build up our context in the backend so that you can easily access that from a design time perspective. You'll get a very familiar in the middle, a very familiar way to do configuration of your activities. But we've enhanced this is an example of the HTTP request. We've enhanced that HTTP request to be even more transparent and useful when you're executing APIs. If you have a connection in this example to Slack, you can just start executing API calls on top of that connection, and we try to make that very frictionless. And then on the very right side, you see a different version of the output panel than what you're used to in RPA. It is very focused on what did I provide as input and configuration? How did we evaluate that, right? The moment at runtime, and how do we expose the context that came back, the output that came back from that activity, but all as JSON. And then more specifically, you'll also see at the very bottom how fast this thing executed. And that's key, right? Because we want to give you tools to like execute faster, to execute in batches, etc., so that you can start playing around with that, making sure that your entirety of your API workflow is fast and lightweight, right? That brings us to running this on Orchestrator. When you package this up, it becomes another process type in Orchestrator, but it's zero friction deployment. That's our goal, right? You hit deploy, we push it into Orchestrator. You don't have to deal with infrastructure. There's no robots to manage for you. It runs on our serverless. We will scale up whenever it needs to, and you don't have to do anything for it. Right, that's the key fundamentals of an API workflow and some of the differentiations when you look at this screen. And we speak about RPA and API workflows next to each other. Do they eliminate each other? Let's be very clear. No, that is also not the case, right? Or the intent. The intent is for us to bring and listen to you, right? Stating, we see that all of you are making far more API calls. Integrating to systems becomes complex, right? Because these API calls will only give you a series of information back. You need to make reference calls, etc. For that system-to-system integration, jump into API workflows, right? If you just want to make a simple API call because you're sending a message over Slack, keep that in RPA. That tooling does not disappear, right? We're giving you all those connectors where you live, where your process is being built. But again, if you then want to package everything up as an API workflow, you'll see the speed and performance the moment that we push this to Orchestrator and the scalability of that, right? And the fact that you then, at this very last point, you don't have to manage your robots. It runs on serverless and you don't have to do anything, right? So those are some of the key differences and it should solve some of that friction. And then most specifically, what we're talking about today, when we start building, Autopilot jumps into the picture. And I'll hand it over to Silviu to go over this, and then we'll dive into the demo.
Yeah, so we know that a lot of you are accustomed to RPA workflows, that building APIs may be something new and not something that you may know how to build immediately out of the box. And that's why we've introduced Autopilot and we GA'd Autopilot, the new Autopilot chat specifically for API workflows. And an Autopilot is an integral part of API workflows and of the entire building experience. And this is why and I will show you later, you want to build an API workflow, I strongly encourage you to first try to build it with Autopilot because it will be able to build almost any relatively complex API workflow from scratch. It will be able to build a workflow even if you give it documentation or you give it links to the API. It will also be
Somebody's
able,
off mute.
yeah,
Sorry.
it will also be able to suggest improvements, generate expressions, and debug and fix any type of debug errors. So yeah, it's really powerful in API workflows, and that's why we're making this demo showing both of them.
Yep.
However, before I go forward, I want to mention that in API workflows, this Autopilot API workflows is just the first slice of what Autopilot is going to become in the next few months, and that is an Autopilot that is across the entire build area that we have available in cloud and on Studio Desktop. And that's why, as part of this demo, I'm also going to show you a bit of Autopilot in Maestro and in Studio Desktop. All right, let's begin. Okay, I will begin with a new project. Normally, we're going to present here a very simple use case where you are creating a new product entry in HubSpot CRM, and then you want to also update the price of that product based on some RPA workflow. In this case, we're gonna pull that data from Amazon to have some grounding on what the pricing of that product should be. And in order to build this relatively simple workflow, we are gonna first start with an agentic process just to visualize it more easily. And I'm also gonna use Autopilot to build it because it's easier. So here I am. I created a new project. I'm gonna open Autopilot, and I'm gonna tell it here that I want you to build a simple process that inserts a new project into HubSpot, checks the product's price on Amazon via web browsing, and finally updates HubSpot with the price it found on Amazon. Now, it's relatively simple, and what's important when you work with Autopilot is that you do describe your work, your use case rather well, because otherwise, results may differ. It may not be. It can't really guess what you're thinking. It may try, but it can't guess. All right, so it was able to build the process, and now it will also suggest to me to create the projects associated with this process. So the first one is going to be an API, the second one is going to be an RPA, and the third one is going to be another API project. And again, this is very useful because you may be used to always building RPA, RPA, but Autopilot can help you, get some idea where you could maybe use API instead of RPAs because API is faster and more reliable when it comes to API automation. Okay, so it created the projects that I needed. Let me rename this solution for HubSpot product. And I'm going to call it here main process, main business process. Okay. And now I'm going to hand it over to he, as he is going now to start building the API workflow that was generated here, respectively insert new product into HubSpot. Okay, hey, just a second. Let me share it with you.
And that's the other piece of the puzzle that's important here, right? All these projects now live together in solutions. So that makes it easy to share. Silviu already added this API workflow as a project type in there, right? So I can now take over, start building that piece of the puzzle out, hand it back over, and then he'll continue. Somebody just asked Silviu in the chat for the prompts. I think that's a good idea to share what we've been doing here later on.
Oh, yes, I can share the prompts at the end. It's not a problem.
Rome. My Rome is gone. Just a second. It doesn't show up in my share here. Here we go. Share. All right, so then I can share full screen. So let me refresh this. Silviu and I are on the same org and tenant. Let me double check that. Yes, product demos. So he just built this, right? Solution for HubSpot product. So as much as he now handed this over to me, and I immediately ran into this API workflow, which is great. So, right, in case you want to start building this from scratch, here from the plus, you can add different types. API workflow is now, because we're GA, we're part of this dropdown, right? You'll notice that our canvas looks very similar, or should notice that it looks very similar to what you're used to in RPA. The plus here has changed a little bit. So we have catered the activities in such a way that you can really only do HTTP calls and scripting against that, right? And then obviously we gave you means to like loop over that to assign a variable, etc. The details that you would expect. But it starts with the connector catalog. Right, this is the same connector catalog that you see in integration service, therefore in RPA and Maestro, etc. Let's start with what I'm trying to do here is build or push our a random just for a demo purpose, a random listing of products into HubSpot, right? So that Silviu can then afterwards work with them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask OpenAI for an array of product listings with the information that I need. It will randomly fetch that, and we'll use GPT. We'll use 5.1, and I think I need to like empty this out for the max tokens. And then I have a prompt prepared here that basically says, oh, my max can die. That basically says, return me an array, and I'm forcing it to return an array of product types, right? An array of JSON objects, sorry. And that's what it says here, because I want to then be able to parse that, right, into my API workflow. It shows a good way as to how these APIs are typically responding either properly with API details, with proper JSON or not, right? And how you can then actually start dealing with that. So because we're so fast at execution time and so lightweight, the one of the differences is you want to see what these vendors are sending back. As much as we give you IntelliSense, it's a lot easier when you see what the actual content is, right? So I can start running this, and this OpenAI call always takes a little bit, but what you'll notice is that we immediately start this, right? Workflow start is where you could put request data in, right? If you have inputs and you build up a request schema, you can publish this as an API endpoint actually through API triggers on Orchestrator. You can now submit a JSON into this, right? And that would show up here in this workflow start. You would define that in here under the data manager and inputs. And then let's see what this gives back. But this should give us like I'm not expecting just an array back. What I'm expecting is there we go, right? In this output section, you'll see all the details from, and I have to move zoom here. You'll see all the details of what this, again, in full transparency, right? What OpenAI sends us back. So you'll get what I'm curious about is what is the actual message that he gave us, right? And this seems to be an array, and you can start reading through this, but it doesn't look very good. So let's try to parse that. Let's try to parse that. And what I'm doing is I added a JavaScript on Canvas. So the scripting language for API workflows, to repeat, is JavaScript. You can see details in here if you want to. You can switch back and forth to the run output. You can change these screens a little bit so you can navigate easier. But we also introduced the concept of the variables and giving you a view on the context, right? So I can here state that this is the message that came back. And let's grab this content, and then this isn't returning anything yet. This is a JavaScript function, so you want it to return something. And this doesn't look great, right? So what we do here is this expression output. We're trying to evaluate that with the information that we have. That's why clicking this debug is so relevant throughout your entire build process. So what we want to do is we want to parse this, and then that should come out clean. There you go. So now you get a very nice array of objects back, right? There's a lot of information in here, but at least now it's a JSON object that I can work with. So if I run that, and we'll do that again, I'll have to wait for OpenAI again. But what will happen is that we'll have the next JavaScript activity in here, and that will now have a proper array. And I'm in debug mode, so I have to wait until this completes so I can start building. My next steps will be to loop over this data. We have a for each, we have a manual loop, a do while loop. That last one is relevant, that do while, when you want to start paging over data, right? As much as we want to give you on actual connectors, we'll give you the ability to fetch all the information from the vendor in a safe way. We'll give you pagination options as well. And then you can start looping over that by verifying, is there more pages that came back from the vendor, as an example. These are slow. These calls are slower than I had yesterday. Maybe I could change the model to a mini model that might respond a little faster. Come on. I'm also happy to answer any questions when let me see in the chat. Yeah, on the licensing part for API workflows, I can answer that as this is running here. So the way that licensing works is that we're charging you for integration activities, right? Which means basically any outbound API call that you're doing. The scripts and the if statements, etc. Let me change this to mini. Here 4.1 mini. The scripts and the API calls that we have and expose, that doesn't fall into your licensing. So that means across the board, whatever you're using and utilizing, whether that's RPA, you're making integration service activity calls, that's what you'll be licensed, what you'll be priced for. Same thing for this workflow start. From wherever this workflow start is being triggered, whether that's an event trigger or a manual start or Maestro starting this, we charge you for that activity as well. All right, so I get an array back in the JavaScript step here, right, with all the details. Let me just loop over this, and I did a for each, and I obviously need to state from here. I can state grab this JavaScript, the result from that, and then in the body, I'll state I'll add a connector to it, and I'll state HubSpot CRM. And then we have an activity to create a product. Let me search for that product. And Silviu and I share the same connection on HubSpot. I created that in a shared drive. That's also important, right, for you to know. And then I can start pulling in some of these variables. And this is where this becomes a nice expression editor, right? So you can dive into the expression editor, start typing from there. I can grab, there's a nice hidden feature in here. So I can say from this JavaScript, I want to grab this name, and then for some reason, my mouse doesn't allow me to, but that's the value. I should be able to. There we go. Copy path to clipboard, and it will actually grab me the path from here. I don't want this. I want the current item, right? Because I'm in a loop, so I can now start writing this. Let me grab the detail here, and I'll also do that for the SKU because the SKU is part of this. SKU. Right, because I was part of the JavaScript, I think, that came back. Yeah, SKU, name, SKU, and description is what I'll add. And I'll add the unit price, which should sit in here. Tax accent. Unit price up here, right? So save, and then I'll do description. I can also overwrite this and make this a full JavaScript entry that will make script. I do that very often because it will make scripting a lot easier. Unit price, I'll do dot unit price. This doesn't evaluate at this point in time. That's because I write at design time. There's a reason for that. That's because I haven't ran my workflow yet, right? So if I would run my workflow and our designer would know what is in that for each, it will be able to properly parse that. So let's run that again. And then Silviu, this is a create product to HubSpot, right? So what's going to happen is for each of my arrays in my JavaScript, it should be able to call that create product. That should then, and I say fingers crossed because that's the demo perspective, that should create an identifier of this field. Not a valid JSON. And this is debugging. So it's a dev call, so that's okay to have. What happened is I changed the model here. So my expectation is that the response here came back a little different. Yeah, fantastic. So in this mini model, OpenAI now through this JSON up front, you can start and that's why my JavaScript fails, right? You can start dealing with that. Let me just switch back to the actual 5.1. I'll do this codex mini. I think that actually also responded well. You can deal with that. Autopilot, speaking of, why is this failing?
It's only supported in VR responses.
No.
So it's
Okay.
different endpoint.
Okay. 5.1 then. We'll just wait a little bit. What I was going to say is you can deal with that. Autopilot is there also to help you, right? If you see some of these bizarre, like I want to parse this and it doesn't work, you can literally just throw that into Autopilot. It will rewrite the JavaScript for you
Yeah.
to take that out of the parsing.
In this scenario, what you would do if you don't know what to do, you would go to Autopilot, you would write test this workflow for me. It will test it, the workflow will fail, and then it will automatically understand why it failed, and it will very likely fix the JavaScript and make the workflow functional.
Yep. And in scenarios where, and that robustness of your trying to build your workflow, right, specifically in such a dynamic call that I'm making here, right? You never know what what OpenAI is going to return back. Okay, this is great. It's doing the product creation. You never know what it's going to throw back. When I just put in that JavaScript and I parse the response, expecting this is what it will give back, there's chances for it to fail. Autopilot can help you there, writing track catches, writing ifs, etc. All right, so this is pretty cool. These create products, they worked. We give you an option to easily loop through these things, right? So you'll notice that these identifiers change. So if I want this workflow to return relevant data, I'll add a response step, and I can now state things like insert variable, create product, sorry, not to create product, from the for each, which accumulates all of the results into an array. You'll see that I get all this relevant information, irrelevant information back. I don't want to see the headers in something that I'm going to return back to the one who's calling this API workflow, Silviu in this matter. So I can just state, let's map, and this is where the JavaScript comes into play. Autopilot can also help you write this. But I can say ID is then item dot ID, I think is what came back. And this is not properly results map item demo. There we go. So I must be wrong on what was returned here. Oh, obviously, item.content. Item.content.id. There you go. And that's the identifier. And this is what Silviu really cares about. I can build up a full JSON object in here. I could say a name, .content.name. Now he knows what the product is that we created. You would think that that was in the response from HubSpot. Probably in properties, name, right? So I can alter this again. And it's a good example as to how you debug these things because we give you the live view into what actually came back from the JSON, right? And the full path structure from that JSON. You can start coding this to your needs and your changes. So if I would run this now, the full API workflow would return this. Would return this payload specifically. I can add that as my output in here by this generate from payload. And now Silviu has a schema descriptor for this API workflow. And Silvio, I think I can leave it at this and then give it to you. Yep.
Yeah. Thanks. So now the next step in our demo is building the RPA part with Autopilot. And now, mind you, with Autopilot, we are still in public preview in RPA. That's okay. It will work nicely even so. And more importantly, I want to show you how you would build an RPA and how to use Autopilot in an RPA effectively now and in the future after WGA. So this was the project check product price list from the solution. That was supposed to be RPA, and we're gonna open it in Studio Desktop. Now, one important aspect that I need to tell you is that if you want to generate UIA, so UI automation activities, with Autopilot, you will need to have a well-defined object repository. Now, in this particular case, I already created it previously in another project. I have an object repository that I've been using for some time for automating Amazon. And I've created previously, I published it, and in this particular case, I'm just gonna import it in my new project. And we're waiting for the RPA project to be open in Studio Desktop. Notice that it is opened in a solution context, but I can't edit the other projects. I can only edit the RPA ones. Let's give it a bit. All right, here we go. Now, I need to also import my object repository library. How do I do that? I go on dependencies, manage packages, and I have defined a custom feed. It's actually just a folder where I have this project and where I published this object repository library, and I'm just going to install it. Nice. I have my object repository now here. I can check it out with all the items that I have. And next, let's use Autopilot to populate this RPA. Let's open Autopilot. Notice that it looks the same as it did in Maestro or in API workflows. And I'm going to tell it to build me a workflow that receives a product description as an argument, then navigates to Amazon, sets up my Amazon location to the zip code. This is actually UiPath zip code in New York, searches for the product description and selects the price of the first result. Set the default value of the input argument to RTX 5090. This is just for example, so you can build it. It will actually create a generic workflow. Notice that it's telling me what it's going to do. We're now going to build a workflow you requested. It detects a dependency downgrade and it wants to fix it. It explains to me what the problem is. It wants to actually upgrade. I'm like, okay. What happened here is that the autopilot tried to it generated this workflow with the actual beta package that it had on its feed, but Studio Desktop automatically detected that and asked it to upgrade to the latest package. And that's fine, it will work fine. Oops. Let's try again. Or maybe it didn't refresh it. Let's give it another go. Okay, I'll try to create a new file. I think it's not liking this one. Or it's not being the file correctly. Could be a hiccup from Studio Desktop. Let's try give it one more time. Oh, now I see why. They're opened, the files are opened in read-only mode. I don't know why, but let me reopen Studio Desktop. So I guess that is the reason it's trying to edit, but it cannot. Just a second. I think it might have been opened twice, the solution. I think that's why. Apologies for this. I'll open it again in a second. Okay. Yeah, I think I had it opened twice, the solution, and or here, are you still in the solution?
I sure am.
I think that's the reason.
Yeah,
It's
I
locked for
sure am.
editing. It's locked for
I left it.
editing.
Yep.
It's
Try
okay.
again now.
I'll try again now. It will work now. That's why it wasn't working. Apologies for the small hiccup.
I apologize.
Let's see if it's still in read-only mode now. Good thing I noticed. No, it's no longer in read-only mode. That's okay, I guess. Okay, let's try it one more time. Okay, there we go. All right, so before moving forward, I will tell you that there are some issues, as I said in the public preview. It generated a stray use a browser application here that I'm just going to delete. This has already been fixed. And now I have the workflow as it was generated. I need to go through this to manually validate them. We are going to resolve this in the future, so you don't have to manually validate this workflow. And I can actually test it right now and see if it works. Let's go with it. No, it's not opened. Everything looks fine. Let's give it a go. Now, I know it might not work perfectly from the beginning, but that's okay. I want also to show you that you can modify it so that it's not just generating from scratch as you might have been used to with the old autopilot, but you can also edit it now and change it later. So I know it's a fail because it needs to click on deliver on this button first. And it won't find that object. And it will just fail. But that's okay, because we are going to tell it that it has forgotten to set up the delivery, open the delivery location, and configure it afterwards. So I'm going to stop the debugging. Okay. I think it stopped. Yes, precisely, because it couldn't type in. So I'm going to tell it that it has forgotten to open the delivery. location pop-up, and then close it. And now it modifies the workflow. And it added the activity. Unfortunately, I know it's this small issue where it keeps adding use browser scopes that need to be deleted afterwards. But other than that, it did fine. Oops, I think I deleted the wrong one. I think I might have deleted the wrong one. I'll just manually fix this. Then, by the way, if you haven't worked with object repository, I'll show you how you work with it and how easy it is. You just select from here the element you want to be clicked on. For instance, open delivery location pop-up. Notice this is another thing I want to show you. When you create an object repository, why it's important for it to work correctly with Autopilot is that Autopilot, it will look for the descriptions that you see here. Like, for instance, as I said here, first element, get free, close pop-up, and so on. These are the elements that it will reference. It will look for these descriptions when it actually generates the workflow. Okay. Item. And yeah, I think I need to delete this one. And so on. I think I need to use here. I have to write something here. Okay, and now I can run it. Yes, and I have to tell it what to write in the workflow as well. When I type the project, tell it input, what do I want to have? Type this, I have to put a variable that it also created for the description. Okay. And I have to give it a, I think I have to also give it a value to this description. 90. Wait. I just noticed it didn't save my last changes. That's why it wasn't working. So this, oh no, this is correct. Was 1008.
Nice.
Yeah. I know why it took a little bit longer is because the editing, the modification of the workflow don't work yet very well. Other than that, it worked nicely and it extracted the price.
Cool.
All right, so now let's say we had this done and it worked nicely and we save it to the cloud, save as. We also have to sync it to the cloud. And now I'm going to go to my other project they already had. Let's close this. Going back to Studio Web. Okay. And if I open it here, I should have my RPA project nicely done and the API overflow that he recently did. Now, what I'm going to show next is how you extract move the data from the API workflow that he did through the Maestro, how you use it in Maestro.
Yeah, I didn't push the schema in
Oh,
yet. So you might not be able to
yeah.
see the full response that it will give in Maestro. So what I'm
Okay.
saying, right, to just clarify for everybody, I spoke about input and output arguments on an API workflow. What you're really doing is describing what that API workflow can take in and will output, right? It's a JSON schema, just like you would basically call any other API out there when you look at Swagger documentation as an example. And because we do that, and you can do that for your particular process, you can feed that in there. Then when you switch to Maestro, Maestro will know what that API workflow will return, right? Um,
So you didn't generate the schema for this one? Yeah, that's what you're saying?
no, but you can maybe just do output and
Yeah,
then
let's
add
just
a
do
key
it.
or something,
Test this. Let's first test this
or
workflow.
ask Autopilot. Yeah.
I can do it, Autopilot, test this workflow. So let's first test it so that it can learn about the output schema because I'm in a new session, unlike you. Notice that it kept the previous session that I did in Maestro. This is because the Autopilot session in Studio Web is across solutions. Oh, I think I'm missing the connection.
You don't have my connection. It's my
Yeah.
it's my AI key. I don't want you to abuse it.
Oh, I see.
That's what
Okay.
I created my personal folder, so you can't run it.
Okay.
But I can, if you just, for the sake of the demo, just click on output and add just add a key or something, key
Yes,
in
I can
or
do.
ID and name or something. You can do this for everybody. You can either bring this payload. So the nice thing is that, and I'll annotate as he's typing, when you run here, right, it will give you the output. You can copy this payload that came back, and you can then push it in here in this generate payload, which is really powerful, right? Because you don't have to write your own output schema now, and you can make sure, and then you can build functionality in that you want the automation to always adhere to that, etc.
All right, let's see how we can do this in. So now we go back to our Maestro project, and we say that this was the API project that we just built. It's a new product in HubSpot, and it should, and it has ID because this is the output schema,
Yep,
right? So I
nice.
have it, and this is how I consume it further. And now let me show you. So now I go and I say it's the other workflow that I did to the RPA. and I'm going to configure it to use product prices. I don't think I have an input configured to it, but that's okay because now I'm in Studio Web and I can quickly fix it here. And let's go. And in inputs, I can tell it. I think it's still loading. I will leave it for now. But fundamentally, yeah, I have to put an input argument and I can submit there. What I wanted to do next, though, because I want to focus more on autopilot, is
Just Silviu,
here.
FYI, we only have 5 more minutes.
That's okay. That's okay. I want to say analyze this workflow and improve it for me and make it more reliable. What do you think this will do here?
I think you'll take my build and say you didn't do a really good job, and you'll improve
Maybe.
it.
Maybe.
So the
Let's see.
expectation for prompts like this is that it will analyze this workflow, start adding, trying to figure out where these things could fail, right? Not necessarily on connections that aren't there, but more on, as an example, my parsing. This might fail because OpenAI will return something different. You would likely need to try catch here to catch some of these exceptions, right? So that's the typical expectation in like larger workflows that will come out of prompts like this.
All right. Well, I think we can take questions now if there are any while this keeps generating and improving the workflow. If there are any.
Yep. We encourage everyone who wants to ask a question, open their mic now. Now's the time because we're running pretty short on time.
Silviu, would you like us to also run the poll at this time?
Yes, I think this would be nice.
Okay.
All right.
Look
So
how
notice
many
how
activities you added for me. Thank you.
Yes.
Made it production ready, huh?
Yes.
We also have two questions for the audience that just popped up. If you can click yes or no. First is, have you tried the new autopilot chat as Silviu just presented? And after seeing him presented, are you planning on trying the new autopilot chat? I'm saying this for the folks who are watching on YouTube too, so they know what's happening. Until someone wants to ask a question, I'll just share a link to check out all of this year's Dev Dives episodes, because this is the last one. That's how we're ending the year. And this will also be on the YouTube description of this video.
To actually figure out here that the connection that I'm having is not the right one
For HubSpot or
for
OpenAI?
OpenAI. Yeah, it's telling me
Yeah,
that
yeah.
input
I
connection.
created that connection in my personal work folder. I just
Yeah.
checked.
Yeah.
So in that scenario, for anybody listening to this later, this was OpenAI was my connection. The HubSpot one was a shared connection, right? I created that in a shared drive where Silviu and I both have access to. In the scenario where you do take over your workflow like that, Silviu can actually create, if he would have a key for OpenAI at hand, he can create his own connection, run the workflow still, right? The end result would be that those products would still show up in our HubSpot account because we jointly share this, right? Because that's the same connection. But he'd be utilizing his own tokens, his own detail of his OpenAI connection. And that lives in that solution as well. So when I then open it, I'm using my connection. He opens it, he's using his connection. For those coming from RPA, I see a lot of yeses on the new autopilot chat. When you jump into API workflows, right, you'll notice that the scripting language again is JavaScript. If you struggle there at any point in time and you're trying to like deal with it, it has context of what you've been executing. Autopilot is your best friend basically to like write any of the JS for you if you want to do more complex things of data transformations, etc. Or utilize any type of you can throw a curl in there and it will figure out to use a connection you already have and make that curl as an HTTP activity as an example. So there's some very powerful things that you can do there.
So notice I asked it to build a API workflow for updating pricing. It correctly put the product ID here. It created the input schema, the new price, created the output, and now I've been telling it that I want responses to be added so that if I'm going to consume this API workflow in Maestro or anyone else, I need to know if the actual workflow executed correctly or not.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, this is Mita. It was very helpful. When this automation is scheduled, does it have to, do we need to always have the serverless machine, or can we schedule this in any of the unattended machines?
For this API workflow or for the demo that
Workflow.
Silviu was building on the UI automation?
API workflow.
Yeah, API, good question. API workflows, you do not need, and I was just typing this to Chris as well. So that goes back to the licensing portion that I discussed earlier, right? The licensing wise, there's no robot inclusion, right? You don't need robot licenses. We run on serverless in the cloud. And so even if you do not license any robots, you'll still be able to execute API workflows. Apart from that, from a licensing point of view, as much as you don't need that, you do need integration activities, right? Because that's how we will charge all outbound API calls being made from an API workflow, from Maestro, from agents. That all falls under that same integration activities bucket.
Okay.
Platform
Thank
units is what you'll need.
Helps. Thank you.
We're kind of out of time, but there's one more question that I would point out from the chat. I think this one is also for you, He. What products features need to be licensed to use API workflows? Does it require integration service and cloud robots or anything else?
Yeah, I kind of answered that. So yes, on integration service, because that's kind of the backbone, right? So and that's the same for if you want to use agents, API workflows, do any connector calls through RPA or Maestro, right? Integration service is your core here to have those connectors feed through. And then apart from, you don't need, for API workflow specifically, you don't need the cloud robots like I just explained. You need serverless, right? But that comes in the API workflow package.
Thank you for that, He. I see that Silviu also shared the prompts to use because someone asked for them earlier.
Yeah.
We are officially out of time, but if there's further questions that you want to ask, you have all of our LinkedIns in the chat, especially from our speakers. They can help with any further questions you have. I encourage you again to check out all the episodes from Dev Dives 2025, and thank you for all your participation, questions, and feedback. Appreciate it. And thank you, Silviu and He, for great demos.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for attending.
You.
Bye.
Bye bye.